Good evening. Today is Thursday, June 11th, and it is 6:30 p.m., and we will begin this evening's meeting of the Westcat Board of Directors. May we have a roll call, please?
Cameron Sassai,
Here.
Martinez-Rubin,
Here.
Dion Bailey,
Here.
Tiffany Grimsley,
Here.
Tom Hanson.
Here.
Gerald Parsons.
Here.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on our agenda today is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So approved. Okay, public communications. Do we have any public communications this evening? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the consent calendar. Would anyone like to pull anything from the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, moving right along, so approved. Item 2 is items for board action and discussion, so open the public hearing and turn it over to Board Chair. I'm sorry. Turn it over to Rob.
Thank you. So I'm sure most of you are aware this is a new annual requirement before the board approves a budget that we have this public hearing. In our case, there are no vacant positions to report, and therefore there are no issues regarding employment retention currently. So that's, I guess if there's any public comments, but otherwise that would be.
Thank you, Chair. 0 is great. Can't ask for anything better than that. And is this our first or second AB 2561 hearing, or have we done it in the past at all?
This is our first. We had a conference with our attorney this time last year, and we'd actually already approved the budget, so he felt that there was no actual requirement at that time.
Got it. And then what were the vacancy rates, if you can remember, from the year prior or the few years prior?
We have not had we've had open positions throughout the year, but we haven't had any. I think at this time last year we were also fully staffed.
Solid. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay. Item 2.2, receive audit of East Bay Transit agencies.
Thank you. So we've talked about this item a number of times in not a great amount of detail over the past few months. So it was actually last April when ourselves and the other general managers went up to Sacramento before the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and that's when the request was made to make this audit and approved by the committee. Work started in August last year, and the final report was actually just released in the end of May 2026, so it was a long process. There was a lot of meetings between the auditors and staff. A lot of staff time went into this, a lot of auditors' time went into that. However, I'm really pleased with the work that the auditors did. They were really receptive to engage in kind of understanding the issues of a small operator and how we coordinate and work with other agencies. I think one of the real key highlights for myself and the other general managers was in the report, if you've had a chance to read it, they actually went out and rode our systems. They spent a couple of days and made connections throughout the entire Alameda and Contra Costa area, and the report indicates that they were pleased with how well coordinated, connected, there was a little bit of criticism of the signage within our service area, which I fully take on board, and we have we are working closely with MTC to be one of the early adopters of the regional standards and roll out new signage at all of our stops. And I think I've purposely been holding off making any signage changes until that information was available, so we didn't have to spend twice as much on updating things and then redoing it. So I'm open to accept that our signage is not the greatest out there currently, but I think we have plans to do that. But I think just to go through some of the significant findings from the audit, transit coordination across the East Bay is already strong. MTC's regional integration initiatives continue to lag behind schedule. 5 of the 6 transit operators face serious fiscal risk. I think that's just related to the fact that where our budgets look, where our reserves are, and the only one that didn't have that was Union City, and that's because they're part of a larger city, and so their budget has different inputs, different outputs, so they don't quite have the same financial risk as the other agencies. Zero emission bus mandates present major financial hurdles. We're actually I'll talk a little bit about that in our GM report, because there's been some updates on that. Transit agency consolidation is unlikely to solve financial problems. I mean, this is the key one. This is the one that I think we all know is to be true, but it's one of those things that comes up every 7-8 years. I mean, this is the 4th, 5th study of its kind done, with all come to the same conclusions. I mean, if we all consolidate, everyone goes up to the highest labour costs, which is AC Transit in this case, and the fact that there would be some small administrative savings, they would be very minor. And then I think it's not highlighted as a significant finding, but I think one of the things that I really, really pushed the auditors on, and they did touch on this in their report, is consolidation comes not only at a financial cost and reduced service, it also consolidates the decision making in a more central location. In this case, would probably be in Oakland or in central Contra Costa. And so I always go back to the fact that the reason why Westcat was formed back in 1977 is because there was one solitary route that ran once an hour through the service area. The elected officials, the decision makers, wanted more transit service. So I think it was a point that was really well received by the auditors and highlighted as the reason why these smaller agencies exist is local control and the real value of that. So happy to answer any questions if you've got any on the audit, but I think staff-wise, we're really pleased with the outcome of the audit. We are going to be mentioning this every opportunity we can. I actually spoke at a forum called Move Bay Area the day after this audit came out, and was able to highlight it. And I had a couple of people after the fact come up and say, I'd never really thought about local control in this sense and things. So I think we as the staff and general managers are going to really hope to use this audit over the next couple of years to really highlight the good work that we're doing and really try and get that message across more. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Comment.
Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, I'm glad that the audit validated what I've been hearing as a member of the board this time around, and when I first started several years ago, both from your predecessor, General Manager Thompson, and yourself. And if I read correctly, one of the impetus for the report was the perception among advocate groups that it was necessary to consolidate in order to save, and that there was insufficient coordination and challenges to passengers. And the findings could not be, they are not at all that. They're quite the contrary. And so glad to see that. And also that the recommendations, I'll be curious to see what will result several months or maybe this time next year, if indeed there are alternate sources of funding that have not yet been received, not only this time around for the period that the study covers, but as well as prior periods, because the essential element in having a system operate requires that funding, sufficient funding, be available. And with the challenges that have been faced stemming from the pandemic and not only Westcat, but other agencies not seeing the ridership that they would hope to see by now. It's going to take a good number of years before even that source of funding will become available at the levels that we saw pre-COVID. So thank you for the work that you've done and that staff did in light of the work that was already in place and that you had to be most involved in to satisfy the auditor's requirements of time and research that you all probably had something to do with. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director. Well said. Any other comments or questions? Yes?
Rob, have you heard MTC staff response to this, or the pro consolidation people's response to this at all? Or have they gotten quiet to go away, or is this just 4 or 5 years from now we'll be back at it? Hold on to this report.
So we have not had anything official. We actually had the transit operators, general managers, and CCDA have a monthly meeting with our commissioners, which was this morning, and that question was asked, and it has not been discussed more than very internally at MTC at this point.
Yeah, I think it's helpful that who did this report, because remember it was years ago, and Ed Blico and I were on the little subcommittee when we were threatened by what's his name from San Mateo, if we don't consolidate, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And the report came out like this one, and MTC threw it in a garbage can and had them rewrite the report that said consolidation was needed. So, yeah, so it's glad that we've been indicated again.
I think it's really good to have a state level, outside the region come in and make this assessment. So
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Director Sasai?
Thanks. And I want to ask for clarification on the CARB mandate for all new EV or clean air vehicle purchases by 2029. All the agencies across the board, did they highlight the same struggles, which is cost, but also lack of technology available for those buses?
Yes.
Gotcha. And then has MTC provided any sort of indication they would advance legislation to extend the deadline from 2029 to maybe a few years out?
So not MTC, but I think there's a lot of work being done on a state level around that exact issue. There was a push. A couple of weeks ago, I won't get into all the details, but CARB made some changes to some of their funding. You may have heard some of the LC Top programs, the cap and trade programs changed. And I think as a result of that, there's even more pushback and understanding from CARB staff that there may need to be changes to the legislature. There may need to be a pushback. They're already actively accepting waivers from transit agencies for a variety of reasons as to why they may not be able to comply, because technically small operators as of 2026, a quarter of our purchases need to be zero emission. So I think, and large operators that's higher. So I think there's there's a lot more understanding, I think, from a legislative level and from CARB that maybe we do need some relief on these mandates.
I feel like we have taken up waivers on this board, right, for clean air purchases.
So we took up, there were two types of waivers. Me and Tanya have been back and forth on this, actually. There's a bus engine waiver, which allows, because California has stricter requirements on diesel engines. So we've had those in the past. We haven't had any zero emission waivers. So there's two different types of waivers that come into play.
So those other waivers are related to CARB, which we'll have to submit starting 2029 unless the legislature takes action on this.
We would actually have to start submitting this year if we made any purchases.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments from the board?
And I've probably asked this in the past, so I apologize. What is this? So you have the new diesel they call it green. They even have it colored green at the fuel station, 99% renewable. How far away is that from being zero emissions?
Well, so there's two types of things. There's renewable diesel and there's biodiesel. So we use Westcat ourselves, we use renewable diesel, which is entirely made out of, in our case, fish stock. So it's technically pretty much as close as clean as you can get. But there are some emissions, but they don't fall under the same kind of thing. But That is not something that's recognised by CARB. I mean, we are a diesel fleet, and that's what we are. So they don't recognise the difference between what the type of diesel we use, renewable diesel, the bad diesel, however you want to term it. We just use diesel, and so that's what they call. I know I'm not really answering your question, but I guess it's.
Well, is that a narrative that should be changed, like amongst whether this board, cities, counties, local governments, so that people start having a different perception that diesel is not dirty, it's actually clean these days, depending on how you're sourcing it. And I think that's important because, as you know, maybe we won't have the capacity to go electrified like a lot of people want us to do, but we're actually doing something very good for the economy or the environment by having these diesel engines that we have and the diesel that we purchase. Like,
I mean, again, I think that is part of the conversation with CARB on a state level. I think that is part of the whole conversation is, we are doing what we can do. We are using clean fuel in that sense, but it's just not, it doesn't have the definition of a clean fuel, even though it,
Okay, any other questions or comments on this item? All right, moving on to item 2.3, the draft fiscal year 25-26 budget for discussion.
okay, so first of all, I apologize that you're just seeing this today. We were literally working on it until half an hour ago. This has been a particularly challenging year to put a budget together, and this is not an excuse or looking to blame anyone, but we've had a number of data challenges in terms of getting accurate information, being able to complete our financials, being able to complete our monthly reports, our mileage, our hours. So this has been a real challenge to kind of put this budget together. So my approach tonight is to present this entirely as a draft budget, and we'll look for approval of the draft budget because that will allow us to move ahead and start our claim process and also spend money on July 1. But then the intent would be to have a F&A subcommittee between now and the next board meeting, and then bring this back to the next board meeting, hopefully fully completed for final adoption. So that's kind of my approach tonight. So there are some numbers in here that we're 100% we know about. We are going to go back and review, especially the proposed budget, because I think that's what we've been working on today. So I think there's still some numbers that we really need to drill down on. I think the FY 2026 adjusted budget, I think those numbers are probably not going to change when that comes back. I think we're confident where we are in that. We've done the projections of where we think what we're going to spend the next 20 days. So I think we're fairly comfortable with those numbers. But I'm going to go through this fairly high level, and then it's up on the screen, it's in front of you. If there's any questions that come up as we're going through it or at the end, let's do that. So the order of the information in your packet is there's the expenses, then the revenues, then there's a capital budget, and then there's some financial projections and reserve numbers that are also pretty preliminary, but that's kind of where we are. So I think if we start on this initial page, I think you can see that. Just let me move that. Okay. The difference between the estimated 2026 and the draft 2027 budget overall is showing a 3.7% increase in costs, and the majority of those costs actually fall under vehicle and facility maintenance. So a lot of the changes that we're looking to do, we've got an old facility and we've got an old set of fleets, I guess is the easy way of saying that. So we are running into some challenges around the facility on updates, and as we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about vehicle replacements, I think with our potential Lono grant, with a lot of moving parts, we've got a number of vehicles that are coming up towards the end of their useful life, which have more maintenance costs associated with them. So we'll go into more details of that as we go through it. And then the capital budget, we're not planning on making any major capital investments as part of this budget in the upcoming year. However, we are planning on potentially coming back with some vehicle purchases and some facility upgrades that would be done under different funding, and so we would do that under a different process. It's not part of the annual budget. So if we go down to the expenditures. So there's a couple of things I want to highlight on this. I think the FY 2026 estimated actual, you can see for the variable expense for operations, purchase transportation, which is basically what we pay MV to operate our service. We are slightly needing to adjust our budget a little bit higher this year, and this is one of the issues related to some of the data issues that we've had over the past few years. I think when we made our assumptions on the amount of hours and miles that we would operate in the fleet in the year, and the numbers that we used for those assumptions were actually not accurate. We found, and so as we've got more and more into the year and seen those sort of discrepancies, we've made adjustments up. So, I think MV have done nothing wrong. They've operated the service we asked them to do. It's just that we, on our side, didn't actually calculate what those costs were going to be. So that is an additional expense in the current actual. And I should maybe backtrack. I think one of the overarching approaches to this FY 2027 budget is in view of the regional measure coming up in November. We don't want to be reducing service by a huge amount, so we're looking to keep as much service as we can on the street between now and November to help with the narrative that we're looking to improve transit and that. So I think we're not looking to make any major service cuts now. That may completely change, and first week of November that may be a very different conversation. But I think right now the staff approach is to try and keep as much service on the street. So I'm happy to just, if there's anything jumps out, I'm happy to answer any questions. But I think one other item on this is under total services fees. So about a third of the way down the page, it's Clipper online ticket sales fees, and I think this is still a budgetary unknown in this Clipper world that we unfortunately live in that there's been severe delays in the rollout of Clipper 2. Clipper 2 was meant to be fully rolled out by by December, but the last approach was by May 31st. That deadline was not met, and so we are still experiencing Clipper 1 fees and Clipper 2 fees. So there's two separate systems in operation currently, and the revenue reconciliation, the fair revenue reconciliation, there's major challenges around the whole cubic system right now, and it's obviously affecting every operator. I mean, I'm sure it's been in the news coverage. There's been outages. The last cubic outage that affected BART was because cubic had not paid an AT&T bill. So that's where we are with cubic. So I just highlight that because that number, it sort of jumped up and down year on year as we budget, is because we're planning to eliminate Clipper 1 fees, but now we've got to keep them in. So it just moves around quite a lot. So our insurance costs, while you may note that our insurance costs have actually decreased for our main insurance, there's actually two reasons for that. One is that our physical damage insurance has gone down because we haven't had any major accidents, so that obviously plays a role. But I think you're all aware we do pool all of our insurance with 31 other transit agencies around the state, so there's a collective reasoning around that. Our regular CalTIP insurance liability is slightly lower, and that is because there's actually a dividends release being made by CalTIP this year, and when they release dividends, we are allowed to use that funds to offset current costs. So our actual insurance costs did go up slightly, but our ability to use our dividends allows us to make that savings. The big one is diesel, gasoline, lubricants, fees, tires, anything to do with that. It's what we were used to paying a couple of months ago for diesel at $3 70, 80 cents. We were paying $5.25. So it's really hard to fluctuate. So, we always build a contingency in. So we are comfortable with the number we have for this year. But, again, it's such an unknown that it's a challenge each year to kind of track. And maybe on that point, I'll just go back to your point earlier, Director Parsons. The renewable diesel cost is the same cost as regular diesel, which is also doesn't make sense, but that's how it tracks. So it's just another part of that whole equation of what it's diesel. It doesn't really matter how it's made or manufactured. So onto the second page. I'm not sure there's a lot on highlights in the first section. Vehicle maintenance, outside mechanical work. Again, we have a couple of vehicles, older vehicle. One of our double deck vehicles requires a new engine, and I think we're at a point where it's too early to retire that vehicle. We need to keep it in service. So, an engine for a double deck vehicle is not a cheap purchase. So that's why there is a jump in next year's anticipated costs for outside vehicle maintenance. I think over the last couple of years, we've made a real strong effort to keep as much work in-house and to allow the mechanics to do what we, believe they're capable of doing, and, believe in their ability to get work done. But there are some tasks that are just beyond what our small shop can do, and, a new engine, things like that. And some of the transmission work does need to go out to outside services. So, I think a lot of the other costs are, just standard regular costs that we have. Let's talk a little bit about landscape maintenance, and this sort of all relates to I'm sure you all remember our stormwater program and our issues that we've had over the last year, which we've been resolving. But as part of that, we're working with a consultant and really trying to understand what we need to be doing around the facility to ensure that our stormwater is compliant as we're doing that. And one of the things we're discovering is that we have a lot of vegetation and trees that are causing material to drop in and contaminations in the stormwater. So there's another fairly significant cost under landscaping. We're going to be trimming a lot of trees back and doing a lot of landscape maintenance work next year, just to kind of make sure that we remain in compliance with the stormwater requirements. I think onto the third page, again, it's just the general administrator salaries and all of the regular costs that we have. And then at the bottom, you'll see our estimated actual for FY 2026 is a little bit higher than what our original budget was. We'll see on the next page when we look at revenues, it's still a balanced budget. We still have a small surplus for the year. But for next year, we are showing a 3.7% increase overall in our budget, and we're looking at a $17 million budget, which we will talk more about, and that number may change. I'm hoping it won't go higher. I don't like a $17 million budget. I like to keep it in 16 million, but we'll see. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that before I go into revenues, or I can just go straight into revenues.
Are there any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you. On the page, on the section of the budget that's under total vehicle maintenance expenses, and there are salaries, there's a decrease in the estimated actual. Oh, I see. Okay. So you had budgeted for this year, running through June 30th, you had budgeted more than you actually spent. That's why the number of 170.
So that's related to the while most of the Westcat staff are administrative, a couple of them are facility maintenance, so they fall under a different category, and that's somewhere where we made some changes through the year. So we went from 3 employees to 2 employees. There were a number of reasons why those changes occurred, but that's the difference in those salaries.
Without running in, without risking that maintenance not be attended to as needed.
So this is actually our facilities and our IT wages. So
Okay,
it's not
not the
direct.
vehicles.
It's not directly to vehicles. No.
Thank you. Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Okay.
Okay, so we'll go on to revenues, and I'm going to start at the bottom of this page because that's the kind of important number. So the surplus deficit. I mean, so in our estimator for 2026, we're not showing a big surplus like we have in some previous years, which is a good thing. Although we've got a very tight budget this year, so I think I don't think that number is going to change by much. I think we're fairly confident with that number. We are going to be above. We are going to remain in the positive. I'm not concerned about that, but that's kind of where we are in that. But the big number for currently where we are with our draft budget for next year, there is a deficit showing. And I think there's been a deficit showing when we brought this budget a number of times the last couple of years, and we do balance it with our reserves, or the board have chosen to do that. We'll talk a little bit about the reserves later, but we still do have a little over $6 million in our reserves. So that's pretty much the same place we were last year. We've moved, I mean, it's to do with our surplus last year, and then just the way kind of money flows. So we were up to 9 million at one point throughout the year, but then we've reduced it back down to $6 million. So that's where our surplus currently is. But we'll talk about that as we get a little bit further into it. But then back to the top, where you see the TDA 4.0 prior year, and there's a gap. That's where we would anticipate putting the TDA prior year funds to balance the budget. So to go through some of the other revenues, our projected STA revenues are down by almost 10% this year. This is, again, something that every agency is experiencing across the region. It's those funds are down. The Measure J funds are showing a slight increase, and the way that we've always budgeted for the Measure J funds is we are told what the 100% allocation is, and then we budget the 90% of that, and then when we receive hopefully the 10% the following, we receive it normally the following year. That's then classed as the prior year Measure J funds. So that's why you see numbers in there. So that sort of makes up that 220,000 in the draft 2027 budget is what we anticipate getting as the last 10% for this current year. Advertising revenue, we have a new advertising contractor on board, and you may notice we have a lot of new ads on our vehicles. A lot of small local businesses are. I think the firm are doing a really good job of kind of working with the local community to get local vendors on our vehicles. So we're pleased with that. So that as a contractual, so that will see an increase next year. Then moving on down, there's the regional measure 2 and the regional measure 3 funds. The first line item for the regional measure 3, which is in the adopted budget, it's 610,000, and in the proposed, it's 1,685,000. That is the RM3 money that has been fluctuating greatly over the years. A couple 100,000, 2.5 million. So we now have a more stable process in place with MTC, so we can anticipate receiving roughly that $1.7 million annually through that process. Regional Measure 3 prior year is the MTC's approach to the BART feeder bus issue. So they are giving us a loan of $2.7 million. The loan is conditional on SB 63 passing, and then there would be a repayment plan worked out with MTC, not in one go, over a number of years to pay that money back to MTC. And I want to be clear that the conversation has not gone away about feeder bus funds. It's very difficult to do until we're in a little bit better financial situation regionally. But I think the affected agencies we're all clear that, you know, we are still committed to kind of working to try and come up with solutions going forward. If that's part of SB 63, if that's, you know, local funds that BART receive, do that. I mean, I think it's still an ongoing question of how we don't allow that obligation to kind of go away, because, you know, it is clear that, you know, all of your constituents pay into the BART sales tax, the property tax, so there needs to be some recognition of that going forward. I think that is around it on the revenues. So I think, you know, we definitely, if staff have got some fine tuning to do in terms of expenses. I'm not sure we're going to suddenly find any new revenues in the next month, but we'll keep trying. And then I think our approach would be whatever that deficit number looks like, that we would look for the board to approve us to use. One hopeful final year of our reserves before SB 63 passes, because that should give us a fairly good cushion. And while these numbers are not finalised and they have to go through more process, our tentative agreement with ourselves, County Connection and Tri-Delta, we have a split of the proposed money through SB 63, and it would be more than enough for us to not use reserves going forward, at least keep service as it is on the street, even if BART feeder bus funds didn't appear. So, you know, we're looking at more money, significantly more money than we have had in the last couple of years should SB 63 pass. And that is just the proportion of funding that is guaranteed for the operators. There is also the return to source funding that's coming through done to the county for transportation needs. So I think that's still an ongoing conversation with CCTA as to how that funding would also be split amongst all of the operators who are eligible for those funds. So again, happy to answer any questions. There's probably not a lot of detail on the next slides on the capital and the forecasts and reserves, but I'll happily go through them as well.
Questions or comments? Cameron, this side.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe it's just me who has this question or needs clarification here, but the BART feeder funds will be zeroed out. MTC is loaning us the exact $2.7 million amount to backfill that. Conditional on this ballot measure passing. And what would happen if that ballot measure were not to pass?
No, sorry. So to clarify, they're loaning the money, they are. How shall I say this? They're loaning us the money, but we only have to pay it back if the ballot measure passes. So if the ballot measure does not pass, MTC will. There's no requirement to pay it back. So they would give us the $2.7 million, and then there would be no requirement to pay it back. We only have to pay it back if the measure passes.
Got it.
So,
Thank you. Yeah.
Director Martinez-Rivas?
So above that figure of 2.7 on the flood plain? Thank you. Above that figure of 2.7, the 1.685 regional measure 3, is that related to the item that we will hear about next? Part of the process to go to MTC and apply for funds?
well, so this is we've received Regional Measure 2 funds for a long time, and there's been a formula throughout the region how those funds are distributed by operating. It's to do with the amount of service on the street that you operate. And then, so when Regional Measure 3 passed, there was new operations funds for operators. So this is funds that we have received for the last 5 years, I believe, but there's never been an actual formula in place because MTC have been moving various funding sources round to get the right amount of funding to some of the larger operators. So this is funding that, you know, 1 year, I think the first year we received 300,000, then we received 1.1 million, then 2.5 million, and then 600,000. So they've now come up with a formula. So this is it's based on service hours, service miles, the amount of service on the streets, on freeways that individual operators operate. And so every year they'll do that calculation, and we should end up with around $1.7 million annually through this process. The next item on the agenda is just a standard form that we have to have the board approve in order for us to go through the process of all of these funds require applications in a sense. So that's just that process.
Not just specifically that projected amount.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the next slide is the capital slide, and I'm going to ask you not to look at anything other than the estimated 2026 and the proposed 2027. We have not made those projections at this point. I think that's the one of the next tasks on my list. And that gets a little complicated, as I'll share you on the general manager report. But so the proposed budget, we're not anticipating many particular projects. The project listed under the top for $50,000 for the fixed route vehicles is our vendor that we have for our automated vehicle location system, which is pretty much our CAD AVL, which is what our dispatchers use. It's actually a system that looks at the head signs. It provides real-time information. It's actually connected to our fare box and our clipper system. So it's a really integral part of our system. The vendor, we've been having a number of issues with the standard routers that are on vehicles in terms of having the connections work. So this vendor has come up with a proposal to replace all of the routers, and then they will then take responsibility for maintaining, monitoring, making sure vehicles are up and running. Because one of our challenges over the last year, again, because of the changes in our IT personnel, is that we've really struggled to have anyone who's really capable of understanding how to get on a vehicle, look at a router and say, oh, it's that light's not working or that's unplugged. So I think this will really help us keep some of our really important systems on a project. This will come back to the board on a separate item. It's just we're including this in our planning for the year because I think it's a really important project that we kind of need to undertake. And then the only other two items are just minor items. So I think we are only proposing a $68,000 capital budget this year. But again, that's for the every day-to-day things. We do have some other major projects that will come back individually to the board as individual budget items. Then the only other item I really wanted to highlight was, and you're going to have to skip a few. Well, in your packet, it's just the next slide, but let me just skip down a little bit. So the financial forecast, again, we have not done the work to look at these for the future years. So this is again just the first 2 years that have been completed, and it's pretty much just shows what you've already seen in the previous pages. But I think if you go to the last page, which does highlight our current reserve levels, and I think it shows our projections for the FY 2027. We are starting with a just over $6 million reserve balance, and then based on the budget, the way it's written, that would see a very, very minor reduction currently because it's just got the capital program in, but it would potentially show those prior year funds that we would be looking to use to balance our budget. So that's, we are looking at potentially, $1.3, $1.4 million, which would take it down to more of a $3.5 million reserve at the end of this year. But again, staff's approach is that we do not feel it's the time to be having major service cuts right now, because if SB 63 doesn't pass, we're going to be doing more than major, really significant cuts. And so I think now's the time to keep as much service as we can on the street. So with that, happy to answer any questions. But again, we are looking for approval of the draft adopted budget and the draft proposed budget tonight. And then we will come back to F&A committee and the full board with final numbers and either the board can approve it or, we can have further discussion at that point.
Are there any other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve?
I have a discussion item, so somebody can second it. No, it's okay. Do a second, and then I'll ask the discussion.
Second.
Thank you.
It-
Discussion. I just wanted to clarify. So we're recommending, we're approving this for further review by the finance and.
By the F&A, so staff will do some further revisions,
Mhm.
and then it will come to the F&A committee, and then the F&A committee would bring it back to the board in July with the F&A committee's recommendation.
Okay, just want to make sure I understood. Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, approved. And the last item, 2.4, consideration and adoption of a resolution 2603, authorizing filing of an application with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for allocation of Transportation Development Act, State Transit Assistance Funds, Net Bridge Toll Revenues, Regional Measure 2 and Regional Measure 3 operating funds.
This is a standard form that we have to submit annually, and if this allows us to actually make all of the applications that we need for all the revenues that are in the budget. So this allows staff to go through our TDA allocation. It allows us to submit invoices to MTC for RM2, RM3, all of our fund sources. So it's sort of one of those documents that's sort of rolled into the budget approval. But I think we like to separate it out just so it's clear as to what the board are approving. So.
Are there any questions or comments here? Discussion?
I'll make a motion that we approve, that we approve the resolution authorizing the filing of an application with the MTC for allocation of Transportation Development Act State Transit Assistance Funds.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So approved. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, committee reports. Item 3.1, general manager's report.
Thank you. So I just have 2 items tonight, and I think they're both positive. I think the second one is. So the first one is just an update on our free weekend ridership and the first initial week of the free youth rides on our system. So weekends we started in the middle of May, and we're seeing around a 10-15% increase in ridership on those days. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of flows over the summer. There's been a few Sundays where there's been ridership that's surprised me, which sort of bodes well to when we've talked about through the Westcat evolution, sort of increasing some ridership and increasing service on a weekend. So that's definitely positive. The first week of the Youth Ride Free, so if we compare to last year when we did the same program, we had 105 riders, and this year we had 510 riders. So I think we're definitely seeing an uptick. I mean, school was still in, so there's still, there's still a few things to work out. But I think just that initial thing, and I think the 3 operators, ourselves, Canada and Delta, also saw increases over last year in their first week. So as we go throughout next month, we'll report those numbers back out, and then hopefully we'll encourage some youths to ride and keep riding past the summer. So the second item is a phone call I got this afternoon from Ray Tellis, who's the local regional FTA. I'm not sure what his actual title is, coordinator. And it's to do with you will all remember our Lono grant that we received, $20.6 million for start converting our fleet to hydrogen, which we submitted an application, and the current administrative is not approving projects that have hydrogen or electrification in them. And so the grant was sitting there and would have expired this time next year. So we actually, a couple of months ago, petitioned FTA, could we potentially change that project? And with a lot of work from mentioned Tanya on our staff back and forth with FTA. We submitted a letter through FTA requested that we went through this process, and they are going to allow us to convert our grant from hydrogen to hybrid. So we that's kind of our staff proposal right now. There's a lot of details to be worked out. There's a lot of money that was programmed for hydrogen fueling equipment that we've still got to figure out how we can utilize those funds. I mean, the vehicle money is the easy part. That's, you know, it's we can make that change. But it was I think we were sort of left with if we didn't make this pivot, the money was going away, and it was probably our one chance to actually make at least a sort of move in that direction. And hybrid doesn't get us, gets us a little bit of the way. It doesn't get us where we need to be, but I think given the current state of fuel costs, of the technology availability of available vehicles, I think from a staff level, this feels like the right thing to do. Again, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of board action that would have to be taken. We would have to make a change to our zero emission plan. We need to go through the process with CARB to get waivers to do this vehicle. We've got to do work with MTC to change the way the grant was written and programmed. We've got to work with the FTA. So this is not going to be we're not going to be coming back in the next month or so with some of these changes. But I think, it's again, we were sort of left with if you want this money, you need to make these changes. So here's what we suggest doing. And we're certainly not the only agency doing this. This time last year, Union City were given about 36 hours to make their changes to their grants or lose their money. And I know Santa Rosa and Soltrans, who I've been talking with, fairly consistently, are exact same boat as us, and they're going through the same process of making these changes. So happy to answer any questions. No board action or requirement tonight. They'll be further coming back, but I got that news at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so I wanted to share it.
Any questions? Yes.
So does Gillick make hybrid?
Yes.
So that's good.
Yes. I didn't say.
So do they make plug-in hybrids or just?
No,
pure?
No. I think that
Say trying to use up the other stuff as a plug-in, you might be able to put a little infrastructure in place to do the plug-in part, but.
I think we then run into the challenge of having enough electric, the electric grid, our small lot for all those additional charges. So I think I think the pure hybrid is the correct
Safest
option.
way to go right now. Yeah. And how many would you be looking to take on?
9, 8.
7 45-footers and 6 35-footers.
Okay.
We're asking for 2 non-revenue supervisor vans.
Okay. Oh, okay. It would be hybrid. Oh, okay.
And then because there is additional money, we have, I think I've previously said, we have identified some maintenance facility needs that we need to do. And I think now we don't have to make the facility hydrogen ready, hydrogen safe with sensors. There's an ability for us to, we need a new in-ground lift, which is it's a very significant financial. So this money should allow us to do some of those works that would then allow us to work on these hybrid vehicles, safely and that kind of equipment. So it's a little bit of a pivot, but I think, we're looking to make the right decision for the agency and use these funds for much needed vehicle replacements and much needed facility. And I think it's also worth noting that, these are vehicles that would technically be eligible through the regional for federal dollars, but federal dollars are getting a lot tighter now. And it used to be that, and particularly how our agency is located, we compete with federal funding with BART, Muni, AC Transit, the ferry. So we've got significant challenges when in the past it's been, okay, well, we'll ask one of the larger guys if they can drop a couple of vehicles so you can get one. It's not as easy anymore. So I think, having this extra federal money without having to rely on formula regional funds is sort of a really good thing right now for us able to save 13 vehicles that we were due to replace anyway. So it's a good opportunity.
What's the anticipated life of one of those vehicles compared to a straight diesel? Are they about the same? Or
Yeah, I mean, every vehicle has the federal 12-year useful life. I think from what I hear from other agencies, hybrids have similar challenges to diesel in getting to 12 years at this point. I don't think they're unique. They're not like battery electric vehicles that have a 6-year useful life of batteries. So, I think I think agencies are managing to get hybrid vehicles.
across the 12?
And actually, can I add one other item to my agenda? And I'm going to regret saying this out loud, but I've said this a few times now. So we have one of our older MCI vehicles, our Lynx vehicles, will probably reach 1 million miles in the next couple of months. And so I think we as staff are looking to really kind of celebrate that fact and celebrate the fact that the mechanics have done a pretty amazing job to get a 18-year-old vehicle that operates 5 days a week on the freeway back and forth to 1 million miles. It's a testament of kind of how well our maintenance team do, and I think it's just something that we as staff want to highlight. And I think it's an important thing that we recognise that work, because I don't think there's many transit vehicles now. I mean, 20 years ago you might have got a vehicle that far, but vehicles are built now. It's a challenge, and they've done a great job doing that. So.
Yes.
So the MCI vehicles, those are the original we bought them used, or this is one of the ones we bought?
This was a one we bought originally new.
Okay, so it's like the second generation of Lynx buses.
Correct, yes.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? 1 million miles, that's pretty incredible. Okay, moving on to item 3.2, WICTEC report.
I don't have a report, unfortunately. I wasn't able to make the meeting. I don't know, Chris, was there anything you wanted to share? No? All right, thank you.
Okay, moving on to correspondence. Do you have any correspondence?
No one's right.
Sorry to wake you. Okay, board communications, items for future board meetings. Do we have any? Yes, Jerry?
I'd like to figure out how Westcat may be able to send a letter to whomever the different agencies are, be it the City of Hercules, the Contra Costa County, I don't know if it's CCTA or WICTAC. There's a section that has had a gap for seniors and our transit riders and just regular pedestrians. And there is a bicycle lane between Willow Avenue, Parker Avenue, and San Pablo Avenue where it all comes together. There's a section coming from Hercules down into Rodeo where the sidewalk ends and then the people have to walk on the actual asphalt. I don't know how we can advocate for that, but I think at this point in my life, it's time for us to look at that. And if we have to get all the different stakeholders involved to send letters to whomever it may be and find funding for that gap and fix that gap. Just like Hercules has done an incredible job at because it's the old Highway 50. Hercules was able to get the old Highway 4, a sidewalk for the people on Palm Avenue to I forget the name of that other street, but at the end of the day, it's a safe pathway for people to get from different points. And this is a big point that has a lot of traffic, has a lot of foot traffic, a lot of bicycles that needs to get fixed. Please help me, this board, and the general manager and whomever else, get that gap fixed, please.
Thank you, Director. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Well, questions about that request. So do we know who the first agency would be? Does anyone on the board know who the first agency would be to contact?
Well,
I'm thinking CCTA,
I'm thinking it's a,
and we have a member of CCTA here.
yeah, but I'm not sure we can discuss it because it's not on the agenda. So
Future agenda?
it's not a, yeah.
Prerogative to do. I mean, that would be more the county. You'd have to go to Chanel's office and start
See,
there.
and this is where I disagree, because we have people that take our buses and need to walk to these different bus stops. And so if our agency can't even write a letter, be it to CCTA or whomever it may be, to advocate for our transit riders, I see that as an issue.
So perhaps we can have this as an agenda item request? Is that what?
Yes, I'll make that a request for future, and, you know, it can die, or we can advocate for it, either way.
Is the board in agreement with this for a future agenda item?
Happy to support.
So we're just, I want to make sure, because we mentioned Hercules in that, and I do represent Hercules. So are we asking to just future discuss, because I think the sidewalk ends in Hercules, so I think Hercules has done its part, but are we just asking to get staff to tell us who's responsible, or are we asking, what are we trying to obtain, without trying to have a full discussion on it, but what are we trying to accomplish there?
Maybe it could be a subcommittee amongst some of us, I have no idea, but come up with something so that we can propose to whomever the stakeholders may be, because even Caltrans might even be involved in this, because when the freeways has its issues, whatever, this is an alternate route, right? And there's alternate signage and stuff for people to go on to San Pablo Avenue. So I'm sure that this is like multiple agencies that are involved in this. And it's a gap that really should be fixed. And so I need your help. I'm not exactly sure who or what, but I need for it to move forward, and I need help and assistance in getting that. So whomever it may be. And I do believe that Westcat does have skin in the game to send a letter to somebody that this section needs to be looked at, because we have pedestrians that are getting to our different bus stops, and it's not safe.
So what I'm hearing is a request for Westcat to advocate to other agencies to take action on this project that you're proposing. Is that your request?
Maybe my request is for us to come up with like a letter to the different agencies, the different stakeholders, the different joint powers, whatever they may be, to look at this section and how we can work together, or they can work together, to close a specific gap in a safe route for our ridership. But it's not just our ridership that it benefits, right? It benefits Herculeans. It benefits Contra Costans from Rodeo. It benefits bicyclists that are passing through. So it's multiple layers, right? So my advocacy or us to look at is for something to be on paper, so that it's documented that we're asking for this section to be looked at. And my perception is the first place we have to ask is Contra Costa, but maybe it's WCTAC. Maybe it's CCTA. I'm not 100%. Maybe it's MTC. I don't know. It's a pretty unique section.
If I may ask, I'll make a motion that Westcat staff report back to this board, do some research and report back to this board who would be, first of all, what geographic area we're talking about or you're referring to, and what the role of this agency would be with regard to making it a safer area. Because I believe there are a number of different agencies, but what I've come to learn is first we need to know what we're talking about, what location, and what outcome we want. And even though there may be different entities that may have a stake or a role, we need to identify what that is. And so since we're representing Westcat here, I think for staff to do a little bit of research about what it is, what area we're talking about, and as well what as an agency it may or may not be able to do. Oh, that was a very lengthy thing. So I'll make a motion that the board have direct staff, Westcat staff, to bring back a bit of their research, and this may be phone calls or whatever staff need to do, to just identify what area you're referring to and the role that Westcat may have to make that a safer geographic area for its riders.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against the proposed motion because I don't think it's an appropriate use for the staff's time. We've got a budget to finish up, we've got an agency to run. This is not a bus issue. This is probably better suited for the County Board of Supervisors, Chanel's office, to reach out to her, and Jerry could go talk to that staff, and they could do the research. I don't think this staff has enough bandwidth to take on these kinds of issues that have nothing to do directly with the agency when we've got all this other work that needs to be done. And I don't think it's appropriate, so we direct staff to do something that's really not directly related to operating this agency. This is more to do with the Board of Supervisors office, because that's probably county area. Hercules sidewalk stops there. So the first stop for Jerry, if he's passionate about this, is go talk to the staff at Chanel's office and ask them for help. And then if we could write a letter once all that's figured out and staff time's deployed to find out what the agency is proper to do this, then at that time, maybe we could write a letter. But I don't think this agency should be the one to carry the water because you're really passionate about this. That's great, but that's not what this agency's about. This agency's about running buses, not researching what agency might put sidewalks in somewhere.
So you're saying that we don't have skin in the game to understand what?
I'm saying we don't have to put staff time towards this.
Hold on. Because how much staff time? Maybe we can put an hour to it, right? Like, I don't want to waste a bunch of our staff's time. I can tell you this, the same thing with the intersection underneath the freeway. There was no ped head from the park and ride in Rodeo to across the street where our Lynx bus goes. And that took some conversation years ago. And between Westcat and Wictac, they made some phone calls, and magically there is a ped head so that people can safely walk across Willow to the park and ride and then walk across the street to the bus, because we have passengers that walk across the street. I was told that that wasn't our jurisdiction either, but now we have a ped head and safely people can get across. If we have areas that our bus serves that are unsafe for people, I think it is appropriate for us to send a letter that, hey, we as Westcat would like you to look at this because we feel that our passengers could benefit from having a sidewalk from Rodeo to Hercules or from Hercules to Rodeo. And that benefits multiple things. And it
So,
benefits our passengers. But you can only understand that if you're a passenger.
Madam Chair, I made a motion. Could you call for a second?
I'll make a second on the motion right now. We've already had discussion here, but I think that this is sort of went past the boundary of discussion for request for agenda item. I think really clearly, and I second the motion because I like new discussions, and I think it's worthwhile to discuss. And it's one of those things where there's no date certain attached to the motion. So I know we are in the midst of budget season right now. Don't expect staff to bring this back within budget season. This will come back in July, August, whenever is the most appropriate, and then sort of feel them out for how much work is involved here. But I think it's a worthwhile discussion, and thanks for bringing it up.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I don't think we do a first and a second. This is a future agenda item, so it's just a polling on the whatchamacallit. So
No,
there
turning
is
to
no.
directing staff.
Well, but it's still it's a poll. It's not like we take an action because it's not on the agenda. So we can't have we have motions on things that are on the agenda. So I think it's just a poll.
Okay.
I think we have
There
two.
was a motion made to direct staff to put time in, so that, you're saying that motion is not relevant.
I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I would say. And so I think we have two different opinions. We probably should just poll, Madam Chair. And then we have one, and then I think I heard a second from Director Hanson, and we can see which one. Because I think that's what, we're gonna need somebody to give us some guidance here, but I don't mean to.
I would agree. I mean, if you're giving direction to staff, it should just be a poll of the board and the board request out of staff. But there should not be a motion.
Okay.
Okay. May we have, should we have a roll call poll or
It's
just
just
a?
to kind of.
Okay.
So I think we have, may I?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I think we have two different ideas, so you probably would poll on one and see how many you get, and then poll on the second one, and maybe none, maybe all. We'd have to go from there.
Sure. Okay. All in favor of having an agenda item? Aye?
Aye.
We have,
Yeah, you have a majority.
okay. Okay,
Yeah, it's just sort of a, yeah, so you got
Okay.
3, I think.
okay.
4, I think.
You want to do a
I'm-
verbal?
And I say yes.
You say yes?
So we have a majority. Okay.
That's why we have agenda requests, right? Opportunities.
Any other items for future board meetings? Any other board communication? Okay, yes,
Just lighten the mood. Happy summer.
happy summer.
Delta today.
And we say that we can now move to adjournment. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and happy Juneteenth.
Yes.